Imagine sitting in a tiny metal spacecraft, knowing that if one small thing goes wrong, you're never coming home. Sounds like the plot of a Hollywood movie, right? Nope. This was real. And over 400,000 people worked together to make it happen. Welcome to the Apollo program. The mission that took humans from Earth to the moon. But here's the crazy part. Just 8 years before the moon landing, America couldn't even send a person safely around the moon. So how did NASA go from almost impossible to one small step for man? Well, it all started with a challenge. In 1961, the Soviet Union was winning the space race. They launched the first satellite. They sent the first human into space. And honestly, America was falling behind. Then President John F. Kennedy stood in front of the nation and made one of the boldest promises in history. He said the United States would land a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth before the end of the 1960s. There was just one tiny problem. NASA had absolutely no idea how they were going to do it. Think about it. There were no moon rockets, no moon landers, no spacesuits designed for walking on another world. The computers at the time were less powerful than the smartphone in your pocket. Yet somehow, they planned to send people nearly 400,000 kilometers through space, land on the moon, and make it home alive. Most people thought it was impossible. Some scientists believed it couldn't be done before the 1970s. Others thought Kennedy had made the biggest promise a president could never keep. But while everyone was arguing about whether it could be done, NASA quietly got to work. Thousands of engineers started designing the most powerful rocket the world had ever seen. And trust me, it was absolutely gigantic. NASA's biggest challenge wasn't finding brave astronauts. It was building a rocket powerful enough to escape Earth's gravity. Imagine trying to throw a baseball so hard that it reaches another world. That's basically what NASA had to do. The result was the Saturn V rocket. And this thing was an absolute monster. It stood about 111 meters tall. That's taller than a 36-story building. It weighed nearly 3,000 tons when fully fueled. At launch, it produced over 7 million pounds of thrust. It was so powerful that people standing several kilometers away could actually feel the ground shaking. But building the rocket was only half the problem. NASA also had to prepare astronauts for something no human had ever done before. They trained almost every single day. They practiced underwater to simulate weightlessness. They spent hours inside tiny spacecraft. They learned how to survive if something went terribly wrong. Because in space, there are no tow trucks, no mechanics, and definitely no emergency exits. Every single button had to work perfectly. Every single calculation had to be correct. One mistake could end the mission. Then, disaster struck. On January 27, 1967, during a routine launch rehearsal, a fire suddenly broke out inside the Apollo 1 spacecraft. The cabin was filled with pure oxygen. The flames spread in seconds. The crew tried to escape, but the hatch opened inward. The pressure inside trapped them. Within moments, all 3 astronauts lost their lives. It shocked NASA. It shocked America. Some people believed the Apollo program was finished. But instead of giving up, NASA stopped everything. Engineers investigated every single mistake. They redesigned the spacecraft. They replaced dangerous materials. They built a faster opening hatch. Hundreds of safety improvements were added. It delayed the mission, but it also saved lives. NASA learned one of the hardest lessons in history. Space exploration is incredibly dangerous. But if they wanted to reach the moon, they had to keep going. And after years of rebuilding, The Apollo program was finally ready for its biggest challenge yet. By 1968, NASA was finally ready to leave Earth's neighborhood. Their next mission was Apollo 8. And this mission would make history. For the first time ever, humans would travel all the way to the moon. But there was one catch. They weren't landing. Their job was to orbit the moon, test every system, and make sure future astronauts could actually survive the journey. Imagine flying nearly 400,000 kilometers. Just to say, yep, looks good. Then flying all the way back. During Christmas of 1968, the Apollo 8 crew looked out the window and saw something no human had ever seen before. Earth, rising above the moon's horizon. They captured the famous Earthrise photograph. A picture that completely changed how people saw our planet. Suddenly, Earth didn't look huge. It looked small, peaceful, fragile. One tiny blue marble floating through space. A few months later, Apollo 10 took the next step. Think of it as the ultimate dress rehearsal. The astronauts tested almost everything needed for a moon landing. They even flew the lunar module to within about 15 kilometers of the moon's surface. Close enough to prove it worked. But they weren't allowed to land. That job belonged to the next mission. Apollo 11. On July 16, 1969, millions of people watched as the giant Saturn V rocket stood on the launch pad. 3 astronauts climbed aboard. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins. Years of planning, thousands of engineers, and the hopes of an entire nation. All came down to this one launch. Then, ignition. The engines roared to life. The ground shook. Flames exploded beneath the rocket. Slowly, the most powerful machine ever built by humans lifted into the sky. The moon was finally within reach. After 4 days of traveling through space, Apollo 11 finally reached the moon. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed into the lunar module. They named it Eagle. Michael Collins stayed behind, orbiting the moon alone inside the command module. Imagine being one of the 3 people on the mission, but having to watch your teammates make history from space. As Eagle began its descent, things suddenly started going wrong. Warning alarms began flashing inside the spacecraft. The onboard computer was overloaded. Fuel was running dangerously low. Then Neil Armstrong looked out the window and realized the computer was guiding them toward a rocky crater. Landing there could destroy the spacecraft. So he took manual control. Imagine flying a spacecraft you've never landed before. Hundreds of thousands of kilometers from Earth, with only seconds of fuel remaining. Talk about pressure. Then, on July 20th, 1969, Mission Control heard the words everyone was waiting for. Houston. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Cheers erupted across Mission Control. But the biggest moment was still to come. A few hours later, Neil Armstrong climbed down the ladder. He placed his left foot onto the moon, becoming the first human ever to walk on another world. He said the famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Soon after, Buzz Aldrin joined him. Together they collected moon rocks, planted the American flag, set up scientific experiments, and took photographs that are still famous today. After about 2.5 hours, they climbed back into Eagle, lifted off from the moon, rejoined Michael Collins, and began the long journey home. On July 24th, Apollo 11 splashed safely into the Pacific Ocean. Against all odds, Kennedy's impossible promise had become reality. But the Apollo program wasn't over. 5 more missions successfully landed astronauts on the moon. They drove moon buggies, explored mountains, collected hundreds of kilograms of moon rocks, and helped scientists learn more about our closest neighbor than ever before. In 1972, Apollo 17 became the last mission to land on the moon. Since then, no human has walked on the moon again. Pretty surprising, right? The Apollo program proved that humans could achieve what once seemed impossible. It inspired millions of people to become scientists, engineers, pilots, and astronauts. Even today, NASA and other space agencies are using lessons from Apollo to prepare for future missions to the moon, and eventually, Mars. So the next time you look up at the moon, remember, humans have already been there. And one day, we might go even farther. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. If you had the chance to spend 1 hour on the moon, would you do it? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.